Great, thank you so much. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming out, knowing all of the possible things that you could be doing in Singapore right now. It warms my heart that you're here. I'm really glad to be back. Singapore is a special place, and it's been a real pleasure and a privilege to be able to collaborate and connect with the Center for Livable Cities. So today, you might have seen, we're going to talk about participatory futures, but we're actually going to play with the concepts and the ideas. Want to just quickly ask you, and certainly we have a small group, so maybe we can go around and do some introductions. Maybe once we get, okay, microphones are coming out, because we are recording the session, so do make sure, please, you use the mics. But maybe just a quick show of hands, how many of you have been working or have worked, or say you have a knowledge of futures and foresight? Okay, all right. So how many of you are coming this from like the planning, urban planning side of things? How many of you have just no idea why you're here? Okay, a few people, all right, just checking. Yeah, okay, so I didn't want to assume any prior knowledge in futures and foresight, so I'm going to happily bore some of the professionals that we have in the room who are more familiar, but just to create sort of a framework, a working knowledge. Hi, welcome, please come in. So I'll provide a little bit of context and then talk about participatory futures as well. Maybe what I'll do is I'll get through the introduction of that language, and then we'll go around and do some introductions before we do the exercise and kind of mix things up a little bit. So we'll go back to my title. So Urban Participatory Futures, a game for using foresight to create impact. I'm very fortunate to do a lot of this work in places where foresight as a term doesn't even exist. So now we're getting to the point that we're not trying to translate it. So I just did an online event yesterday for colleagues in the Maghreb Sahel region. And because of the legacy of using French, we talk about prospective. I also work a lot in Central Asia, and we often then rely on the Russian. And Russian, the term is prognost. The problem with futures and foresight in translating it is that it has different connotations. So prognost, we have a similar term in English, prognostication. Prospective typically means it's a little more open in a very French kind of way. And actually, it's a bit of a tangent, but I'll go down this pathway because I've already started. There's two terms for future in French. There's le futur and l'avenir. And the idea of futur is like the future, the time and space ahead of now. Anyone speak French? Okay, then my pronunciation was perfect. L'avenir is sort of like, well, we're not really sure what's going to happen. And that is often the case, and I think actually this terminology is important because when most people think about futures or the idea of foresight, and I'll talk about why it's futures plural, they think about stuff like this. So I've gotten the crystal ball joke in countless countries, right? And it's, of course, the aim to try to be anticipatory, to think about potentially what could happen and what could lie ahead. And forecasting as an activity is certainly a part of foresight, but it's not the totality. And I'll talk about a little bit why that's the case. So, really important, crystal ball gazing is not what futures and foresight is about, which is to say, not trying to predict the future. Not trying to say with complete certainty, I know what next year, the next 3 years, the next 30 years is going to look like. And certainly all the research suggests that the long-term forecasting doesn't really hold up. There's actually a great body of work about sort of more near-term forecasting. Some colleagues in the US have put together, and there's a whole school called super forecasting about the kinds of skills and mindsets and practices that people use to do more near-term. That's very much linked a lot of times to what you find in security or intelligence functions, like an analyst type function. But it's really interesting because it shows actually that some of the key concepts of foresight do actually have applicability for doing forecasting work. All of that to say that we have a very interesting thing that happens in our brains when we think about the future. It turns out that actually we have a biological bias that kicks in when actually we're asked to think about the future. So some neuroscientists did this activity, and what they found was the parts of the brain, a very technical term, that light up are the parts associated with episodic memory. So we literally see the future through the lens of the past and specifically our experience. Now, as a species, that gives us a phenomenal advantage, right? That means we're not just waking up every day fresh, that ultimately we have the ability to retain knowledge, to learn from that knowledge, and ultimately to act on it. Of course, however, it means that we do have this very interesting implicit sort of assumptive, let's call it a biological sort of thing that happens that really is a limiting factor. And my guess is that everyone in this room has felt surprised over the last 3 years, year and a half, maybe, possibly even the last 6 to 9 months, right? And of course, we feel surprised because our map of reality or our mental model of the world or our expectations for the future then doesn't align with, of course, a very volatile, a very uncertain, all those acronyms apply to what the world is. So I wanted to give that as a little bit of a framing to say that, of course, Futures and Foresight is attempting to understand and make sense of what is possible. And of course, that means trying to think about what's probable to do forecasting. But it's also very much open to the preposterous. And in a variety of cases, and certainly with some of the organizations I've worked with, like Interpol, and actually worked for a few years, was an advisor for their Global Complex for Innovation, which is based just here down the road. It is about preventing certain futures. And of course, we know relative to climate change, this is the exact conversation we're having. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Please come in. So there are different schools of thought, and I've given you more of the constructivist approach, which is to say, how do we think about the future, challenge our assumptions, bring our biases out, think about blind spots, think about the gaps in our understanding, not just of what's possible, but also the here and now, so we can try to shape and create better futures. Now, of course, this looks very different in a corporate context than it does in a governance context, but ultimately, there's a big school of thought that falls into that kind of constructivist category. How do we actually build a better future and use foresight to be able to do that? That's a big part of the work of this group that I was a co-founder of, and we really started ultimately because there was an organization in the UK, Nesta, which is a social innovation agency, said, we want to understand and make sense of what these practices look like around the world. So myself and 8 other colleagues, everywhere from Taiwan to Brazil to Australia to the Americas, got together and looked for case studies of participatory futures. And again, futures plural, meaning not only the practice of very much research-driven futures like the academic practice, so people talk about future studies, but also the idea that we're not just looking at one future, but multiple futures. And so we, of course, use the plural. And so the Participatory Futures Global Swarm was born out of that question. And as you might imagine, given that people were in lots of different places, it was a geographically, culturally, professionally diverse collective of researchers, futurists, practitioners, working, this was our bumper sticker tag, right? Working to enable better futures for all. Some people, like myself, had their PhDs in foresight. Some had just completed master's work. Some were also still working on their graduate degrees. Not that that's a necessity for doing this work, but many of them came out of different futures programs from around the world. And the reason I mention this is because the globality and ultimately the diversity of the group, I think, lended itself to a lot of the insights that you're going to actually have a chance to play with in just a bit. So what do I really mean by participatory futures? Well, quite simply, it's the overlap of futures and foresight, which is both an academic field of inquiry, so research-driven, but also a practice. So a lot of times I'm asked to do research on a particular topic or issue. What's the future of X versus Y? Or they say, show up in a room, people are going to show up, and we're going to do stuff, right? And that's kind of what this is. A little bit of both, given that there's a research basis to this, but I'll get to that in just a bit. So participatory futures is really just about the different approaches that we might take for involving citizens. Now, citizens clearly has a certain political definition or connotation, but anyone living in a certain space. So certainly, folks who don't have citizenship, folks who maybe fall into the unusual suspects category as well. But really thinking about how do we engage people, how do we democratize and encourage long-term thinking, and really to do that to inform collective actions in the present. I love futures and foresight because you get to ask questions like what if, but ultimately it has to do something in the here and now. Not that it always is immediately actionable, but ultimately it's trying to produce insights that we can ultimately do something about and hopefully take action on. The challenge, however, is that far too often public engagement becomes just another requirement, the proverbial tick of a box. Or worse, agencies and organizations and institutions think that public engagement is this. Where do you dive in? Where do you start? They feel like, I'm actually afraid maybe of engaging the public. What am I going to get, right? And certainly now, and this wasn't the case even 10 years ago when I certainly started to do more of this work, in the age of misinformation, disinformation, fake news, deep fakes, right? We're quite worried about potentially the information we might get, right? And how do we actually engage with not just the public, singular, but different publics. Of course, now we're in the age where the truth itself seems to be hanging in the balance. So how do we find ways to engage? So the real question driving the group was, what does it look like if organizations embraced participation rather than feeling paralyzed by it? Now, I say participation, and certainly it's been my experience working for large organizations like Red Cross, Red Crescent. I spent a year as their Global Futures and Foresight Coordinator. And I asked, what do you usually do for your 10-year strategy process? They said, we put a survey together. I'm like, okay, great. What's your response rate? 27%. Whoa, wait a second. So you're 190 countries, millions of volunteers around the world, and you seem okay with 27%. They said, yeah. I'll talk about an example of how we tried to challenge that. But I wanted to hit on this idea, and ultimately experiences like that brought forward this idea is what if we brought participation to the front of our thinking, not as we're doing stuff and then we figure out how we're going to actually engage people and bring them into the process. I've put a link here to the report, and I'm happy to share it in other ways as well, but the report that we published goes into a lot of the ideas that we're going to ultimately play with. The game is separate from the report, but it's linked on the site that'll take you to. And it really tries to bring forward this idea, not that it's solely for organizations and institutions. At the community level, there's lots of applicability as well. But really, it's ultimately saying, how do we get out of this eternal present? How do we find ways of trying to bring more anticipatory, less reactive, not only policy planning and strategy, but really decision-making, and have that be something that's meaningful, again, at an organizational, at a community, and even at a familial level as well. So the main question that's really going to drive today's session and is at the heart of what the Swarm was looking at is how can we design more inclusive, imaginative, and impactful participatory futures engagements. Like some of you might feel like you spend quite a lot of time in workshops. Not that there's anything wrong with workshops. This is a workshop. So ultimately, it's how do we think about models that go beyond this as a particular form of engagement. Because similar to surveys, right, all sorts of challenges, people have to go somewhere, right? So maybe we think about different models. I mentioned that we did some research, and in 2019, through the work that we did with Nesta, we're able to then collate and bring together these case studies. The map is quite incomplete, but it gives you some sense of some of the cases that we found. Only 32, I believe 32 cases were published as part of the report. But this map has, I think, close to 50 or 60, oh, maybe it's close to 100 of the cases. And eventually it's going to be reborn, hopefully. But that shows some of the breadth and the depth of the cases. And of course, not all of them were from sort of Euro-America, but try to look globally and understand what this work looks like and really what it means around the world. So I'm just going to quickly go through the approaches, then we'll do some introductions, and then we'll talk about the game. One thing that surfaced from our research was that there seemed to be patterns in how people were choosing to create engagements, so different models that they might use. So what we found was that if we kind of tried to cluster the 300 that we found, they kind of loosely fell into these 5 buckets. So we didn't start off by thinking, okay, let's focus on immersion or create, even though we all felt not only as in our own practice, but globally we saw those particular approaches rising, but it really was driven by the case studies that we found. And again, it's what other options exist beyond the workshop approach, and we were looking not only at, again, workshop models, but outside of the workshop, so how were people creating engagements. One thing that really became clear was not only using physical immersion, but of course virtual environments and experiences to try to actually have people walk into the future. So living and breathing experiences. This particular project was a master's thesis project by a student in Canada, the Ontario College of Art and Design. His name is Trevor Haldenby, and he wanted to look at the future of biotechnology. What better way to do that than to create a biotechnology company from the future? And not only create the company in the future, you create the protesters who are saying it's an evil corporation and it's doing this and doing that. And then what better way than just to talk about it, but actually have business cards, have events, have signups, have products, and people get to show up. And not only people get to show up, but random people on the street say, whoa, what's going on there? And so he created this immersive experience as a way to bring forward, of course, the extraordinary ethical considerations around this new and emerging technology. Another example is a game that we ran many years ago in the city of Honolulu. I did my PhD at the University of Hawaii, which is one of the few places in the world you could focus on futures and foresight. And we had people walk around the city, and at particular pieces of street art, they used mobile augmented reality to learn about the future that they were exploring in a spatial way. So the idea was you were kind of on the journey. Have you ever done geocaching, where you kind of have coordinates and you go to a particular place, right? Kind of like that. Also, augmented reality meets geocaching meets street theater. And so you had a little path you were going to follow, and you learned about the future by having this augmented reality journey along the way. And we used the street art in the city as kind of our, as kind of like check-in points. And then that culminated in a live action role play experience. So it was really meant to be this sort of hybrid, immersive experience, and we did this as part of a research project that we were doing. It was pretty small, only 12 people participated, but we tried to create this model for a hybrid, immersive experience. Another really dynamic approach that's often used, of course, is sense, really short for sense making. Moral Machine, which is pictured here on the right, is a project that was run by MIT, and they basically wanted to know and understand what were the cultural dynamics associated essentially with technologies like self-driving cars. So increasingly, and we're seeing this now certainly in the last year, the implications of different forms of AI. What does it mean and look like? And specifically, what are the choices that might be made from a programmatic or an algorithmic perspective that really have real-world consequences? So in this particular example, who should the self-driving car kill? Should it kill the older people or the children? Would people more likely to kill themselves versus others? This is a really fascinating engagement, and I believe the numbers, if I'm quoting these correctly, are pretty astounding. It's something like 40 million people engaged in this, and they had multiple languages. The website's still active. It's, I think just Google Moral Machine, it'll come up. What they found, I think not surprisingly, but really interesting to validate, is different cultural contexts made different value choices. So in some cultural contexts, we save the children. In others, we're more likely to save older generations. In some cultural contexts, very interestingly, you can't really tell here from the image I cropped, but if people were obese versus non-obese, if you had people that were identified as doctors versus not, right? The choices that people were making. So a really fascinating study. But it was really all about engaging people through digital technologies at scale. So again, in this case, millions of people. To be able to scan, sense, explore, in some cases forecasting the future. So this one, again, is more of a game, specifically about this question. But lots of different approaches like this are being developed. One in particular, this is in relation more to scanning, so trying to spot emerging issues, or as we call them, weak signals, in relation to, of course, the Anthropocene and climate change. But rather than focusing on the threats and the risks, this project said, what are the seeds of good Anthropocenes? Of course, also here plural as well. And so this was run by a consortium of universities led by a team in South Africa that was specifically trying to identify what might it look like. So of course, lots on decarbonization, lots on things like vertical agriculture, different ways that point to the fact that clearly climate change is something we need to be thinking about and acting on. And here are examples of people trying to bring a better climate change future forward. Another example that you've likely come across and seen, because certainly in the last 10 years especially, it's really grown significantly, is Create. This involves making and engaging with physical objects. In this photo here, this is something called the Futures Bazaar. A colleague, Stuart Candy, created this for the BBC. They were having their sort of away day retreat, and he told everybody, bring something from your home, an everyday object. And what they did was collect all those objects and then went through a futures process to be able to turn them into objects from the future. So thinking about issues in relation to the future of media, or even like we saw before, biotechnology, and ultimately creating a bazaar from the future that you could walk through. So what does it look like if you're walking through a bazaar in the year 2050, 2080? This actual approach was open sourced, and it won an award from the Association of Professional Futurists last year. And it's a really cool project, and you can download the information, and I'm happy to share that with you as well. Another example, when I was at the Red Cross Red Crescent, we commissioned different futures design organizations to create artifacts about the future of humanitarian aid. This was an actual device that uses, as you can see, wearables. It uses also blockchain technology to be able to help frontline responders. So all, of course, the focus when I was in Red Cross Red Crescent was humanitarian aid, and specifically, right, sort of crisis relation or crisis response. So what is the future of this tech, and what can it look like? And we actually had almost like a museum exhibition that traveled to the big meeting in relation to the strategy development process, and about 4,000 people from the organization encountered these, and it then lived on and became something that traveled around the world. So an example, again, of making the future quite tangible, creating something from the future. Another example, again, of a different approach, and as we'll see, some of these can be hybridized, is Deliberate. So for a number of decades, there were no changes to the city, Mexico City's constitution. And they decided, okay, we need to change that. But one way they decided to change that was not only by doing surveys and knocking on doors, but by having a process that if a proposal reached a certain threshold, a certain percentage, if it ultimately, almost like a leaderboard, got to a certain point, it automatically moved forward in the process. What this allowed the city to do was to enshrine rights for new groups, like LGBTQ communities. It also brought forward services in relation to animals around the city, so things that people had talked about for a long time, but never really were able to get political momentum for, because they didn't actually have the ability to deliberate and bring it forward. And so it's a pretty radical shift for the city, and a really interesting project that was led in a very grassroots way. So Deliberate is not only about digital technologies, but also about different ways to get people to share ideas and make decisions, most importantly. So the Deliberate piece is really critical. Of course, now it's really popular, and it's certainly grown, not only climate assemblies, the idea of citizen assemblies, but participatory budgeting. So having different groups actually be responsible for distributing funds. So as you can see here, the City Council of Madrid, through participatory budgeting, so asking random citizens to come and say, hey, how should we give this money away to the city itself? They can allocate about 100 million euros. So this is actual citizen-driven city-level budgeting. Seems like a pretty obvious idea, but pretty radical with regards to, again, how cities actually do budgeting and planning, and specifically how they think about the distribution of funds. Play is one that I've worked quite a lot on. This is from an engagement that I had in the UAE as part of their national energy strategy. So like in most cases, the certain ministry, in this case the Ministry of Energy, builds certain scenarios, but it has to validate them. It has to say, okay, we need to make sure this is okay before it moves up the food chain. So a colleague and I developed a simulation about the future of energy in the UAE. We had this lab, sort of an experiential event, and we had a number of different participants come in from academia, from youth, civil society organizations, government, of course, was there as well, and ultimately played out what they thought those futures were. At the end of the game, we collected all this data. It was then presented on site to the Ministry of Energy, and actually the Prime Minister came as well. And the next day, the National Energy Strategy was passed. Now, not always it goes that fast or that smooth. In UAE, sometimes it can happen. But this is an example where play was specifically used, and the idea of using a game or a simulation to explore those different futures, to weigh those trade-offs, and to do it in a way where it didn't feel like we were directly dealing with reality, but we had stepped out of reality a little bit. In this instance, it was meant to be, again, a little bit of a role-play game, so you could act as an academic or act as a government or a planner, a government official or a planner, and really try to understand what those trade-offs could be. And again, we didn't feel like we were lucky, but we felt like the process worked and that we did validate the scenario that, again, the Ministry of Energy thought made the most sense for the country. Another example, this is a game that developed for the European Commission, and this has now become an open source platform that they've used for gaming on future of migration, future of sustainability, future of customs, so really widely applicable. And ultimately, it walks people into the future. One thing that I've seen that has grown dramatically is the use of games and simulations. So actually, of course, we've seen design thinking and design-based approaches come into Futures in Foresight, but lots with games and simulations as well. Now, as you might have figured out, of course, those buckets are not solely sort of silos on their own. There are hybrid approaches as well. So one thing I think it's important is to point out that even though these buckets kind of emerged through our research, there are, of course, as many approaches as there are practitioners. So hybrid became an important, if not essential, sixth category for our approaches framework. And the example here is a game that we created when I was at the Red Cross Red Crescent. That was a game about the future that you played via WhatsApp. So as I mentioned, we had pretty low response rate for surveys, but through this game, we were able to engage 4,000 people in 120 countries using 6 languages. And so this was a really radical shift for the organization. IT department hated it because they didn't know what to do with it, right? So questions around who has the data, how do you protect people's data, all of that had to be worked out. And we had a really strong partner. There was actually a university that helped to handle the technical aspects of it. But it was a really dynamic way to engage people that would have never participated in a strategy development process before, and ultimately contribute insights that really benefited the future of the organization. So all of that sort of lends itself into the game that we're going to play. And let me pause here in case there are any questions maybe before we go on. How's everybody feeling? Good? Haven't put anyone to sleep? Okay, great. I'll do less talking in a bit. So the one thing we really decided was, well, if we're doing a project on participatory futures and we just publish a report, we've probably failed because we ultimately need to make these ideas participatory as well. So we built a game, and you're playing a version of it, or a modified version of it, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the basic structure of the game. We saw not only different approaches that emerged through our research, but also the topics that different groups were looking at. And again, we completed this in 2019, and we certainly saw lots of familiar topics: food and water insecurity, post-growth economy, air pollution. Of course, you know, this is pre-COVID, but seeing pandemics as well, misinformation, mental health emergency. So these are the topics that different groups were working on. And so clearly, we wanted to focus on 21st century challenges. But then we also saw, because we were really interestingly seeing a lot of focus on using new and emerging technologies. This is, of course, pre-metaverse, but this is definitely virtual reality, augmented reality. And this is, of course, pre the recent AI boom, but lots of interest in using that type of tech. Some tech that maybe wouldn't you normally quite expect, like facial recognition or smart tattoos, but all types of technologies that you might use to connect people. So not only communication technologies in the very traditional sense, but technologies that have some kind of communicative capacity, technologies that you might be able to use to talk to people or other things. You see, we have the Internet of Things here as well. So how can you relay, transfer, share information through different forms of technologies? And this is what we saw starting to emerge in our research as well. Interestingly, we also saw different types of partners engaged in different projects. Now, some of these are exactly what we saw, and some of these we also proposed to try to stretch the play of the game itself. So in all of our research, no one said they were working with Reddit trolls, but we thought that was a really interesting category to include. We did see a lot of interesting things around youth and city government, conservative seniors, so thinking about, again, different kind of demographic groups. But the idea basically of the game is you have a challenge, you use a technology, you work with a key partner, and you design and develop a particular participatory futures engagement. So this is one that we ran online at a UNESCO event a few years ago. This was run also by youth from the Arab States region. And one of the things they were looking at was in relation to women's work in the year 2030. And so clearly they saw lots of workplace bias. So there was a game that men could play where they would have the experience of finding out you're pregnant and then going through the process of navigating your pregnancy while attempting to be a worker. One radical proposition was that it wouldn't just be a VR game, but if you didn't play well as a male, that you would actually get pregnant. Thought that was pretty radical, right? That's certainly not all the proposals ended up being that radical. But not that that would mean losing the game necessarily, but that you'd ultimately have this experience. So they were playing with different types of technology. You can see the virtual reality, it's a little fuzzy, but gene editing as well. Which is to say that I think the game not only is helpful for thinking about the basic and the obvious stuff, right? Using social media, using VR, AR, but also how could we stretch a little bit, right? Now that we're in the age of a bit of an AI boom, thinking about how we might use these new and emerging tech to connect people and of course to share and to try to gain insights in helping people think about the future. So most importantly, it's not a game about the future, about creating future scenarios, but an open source gaming platform for designing more participatory futures engagements. However, we're going to play the game in the future. So from this point forward, we're no longer in the year 2023. We're going to be in the future and playing it as if we're living in a future, which means you're going to have to make assumptions and choose technologies that are available in that particular future. I'm going to talk more about that in just a bit, but I wanted to highlight that point. So on your tables, you'll see a template, one per group. So I'm going to take this one up here. And you'll see it's sort of numbered from here. Maybe we, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, yeah, maybe we can have a few of you come here, and this can be kind of one group, possibly. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. That's okay. And then we'll have 4 groups. Yep. So you'll start with 1, your mission. So your team has been tasked with designing and delivering a participatory futures engagement that has the goal of engaging over 1,000 people. You get to pick your context. So you can pick ASEAN, maybe you're doing regional, national, maybe you're doing Singapore, maybe, you know, who knows, maybe you're doing Malaysia. If you're doing within Singapore, maybe it's a specific, HDB, or we've left question marks, right? So maybe you pick a particular building, right, a particular area. So totally up to you, but that's a discussion that you'll have to have at your tables. Then you go down, okay, what do you know about that context in the future? So again, this is what you presume to know by the year 2040, right? So your horizon is 2040. So you're actually doing this in the year 2040, so 17 years from now. Then what do you need to know about this context in 2040? Then you go up here, you pick your challenge. We've listed some, but certainly you could list others as well. Gig economy, shifting workplace, role of AI, remote work, social cohesion. Then you choose your technology. Are you using wearable devices, AR, VR, generative AI, Internet of Things, your choice. Again, this is in 2040. For this engagement, you have a key partner. Who will you be working with from beginning to end? Maybe a specific ministry, maybe a town council, Gen Z could be a different demographic group, seniors, maybe a tech startup. Then you're going to choose one of your approaches, right? So you see here, create, deliberate, immerse, play, sense. You can hybridize them as well. Don't try to do all of it. It's a bit much, but try to choose your approach. So you mash all of that together, and then you come up with a sentence. So in 2040, our team is designing a participatory futures engagement with your key partner for people living in your context, focusing on your challenge, using your technology to connect and engage people through your particular approach. So super fill in the blank exam, and you've already been given the answers, right? Okay, let me pause here then and see if you have any questions. Yes?
So we're in 2040,
yep.
And we're focusing on an issue that is a problem in 2040, so it's not about future beyond 2040.
Yeah, exactly. So like, just like as if like now officially we're in 2040, right? So when you think about 2040 and these challenges, it's what do we think and know about the gig economy in 2040, right? Or remote work, or role of AI, or social cohesion, yeah? So we're actually in the future, yeah. Other questions? So if you follow the trail, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Then ultimately, you'll discuss at your tables what your inputs are, and you write actually in the paragraph here. So I'll give you a total of 30 minutes, and then you can ideate your design here, right? So again, you're not telling me what the future is. You're telling me how you're going to engage people in that future, right? So you have to tell us a little bit about that future, but it's more about how are you choosing to engage 1,000 people in that future, yeah? So you're designing an engagement. Sound good? Okay, so how about this? Since maybe you're fully into this headspace, let's do introductions when the groups share. We'll do that, right? So we'll give you 30 minutes to actually focus on creating your designs. I'll come around. I'll help you if you have any questions. We'll check in at the 15-minute mark, but you have 30 minutes to actually make all of these decisions and then start to come up with your designs, yeah? Okay. Good luck. Yeah, maybe this can be like a group here. Or maybe if you want to go here or come here, it's okay. Okay, let me pause you for 1 second. Nobody asked the super important question. How do you win the game, right? It's a game. Okay, all right, good. So each group has 30 minutes to create your engagement, use the template. You're going to have 3 minutes to share your design, right? Only 3 minutes. We're going to vote based on novelty, usage of tech, and localization. Today's message, always know how to win the game before you play. Okay, so just to make sure, right? We're going to vote at the end. Which group has the most novel design, which group is the most interesting usage of tech, and then which group has the most localized. Yeah? Okay, any questions? Yes? What prize do you win? That's a fantastic question for the CLC to find out. I think we have some lovely tea and cakes out there for the winning group. It'll be one of those we're all winners moments. Yeah. Just going to grab some water. I'll be right back.
We don't know, right? Could go in,
So that's maybe one of the unknowns then. Like, what's the
level of technology or the kind of technological advancements that will continue.
Yeah, somewhere I'm really positive about energy transition. I think we can fix that quite easily. But I'm more worried about
relationships and sense of solidarity, economic prosperity. Maybe the between the people
Countries that have become sweatshops.
So that could be even what we need to know. Material inside some relationship could also be
But at least I do think we will become more circular in coming years. We are more better and better in reusing anything.
relationship
it's actually that is a because if you want to choose one. We have too many problems.
So just like reality, how are you doing?
Too many problems. We wanted to fix a challenge first
Hmm.
to help us fix the knowns and unknowns because there are too many knowns and unknowns.
Okay, and you
Turns out
picked national, yeah?
Yeah, we picked
Okay,
Singapore.
so one thing to think here is like, what do you think would be the big national challenges in 2040?
Big national.
And it doesn't have to be one of these, right? It certainly can be, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were thinking about the aging population when there's a mobility in the future. Probably there is a challenge in mobility over there.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's a perfect one, right? So it's 2040. You have to engage 1,000 people in thinking about the issue of aging population mobility in Singapore. Okay, sounds
It can
super.
be a challenge as itself as a challenge.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And then, and so kind of try to follow that and then see if you can at least get to this. Yeah? Yeah.
Singapore and Myanmar, if you see the difference between the two countries, maybe that can be balanced out with this.
How are we doing? Have you picked your context and your challenge? Still deciding. Okay. You got about 20 minutes left to design, so still time. Where are you leaning?
I think we're leaning towards like ASEAN, thinking about, I guess, the shifting workforce, like maybe, like a sort of dystopian future of 2040, maybe like inequality is so severe and the economy is so much more connected, and so like maybe there's certain areas in ASEAN that are thriving, like economically compared to others, and then certain parts of ASEAN, like they just become like so specialized in like very cheap worker, while others become very specialized in like, I don't know, other high
Yep.
learning industries.
So to share this knowledge among this entire region, as you said, and what is the technology that is going to be used and by which of this? So that's
So think about this is a group that you're going to be working with, right? Maybe like across all of the region, yeah? So it doesn't have to be even just one. But what's interesting about yours is if you choose regional, you definitely want a tech that can connect people who are clearly not in the same space, right? So I would, just to make it easier for yourself, I'd say think about a tech that could do that, right? That works across time and space, that you could maybe have people interact in some way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds great. You got about 20 minutes left, yeah. How are we doing here?
Great, we are
Yeah?
fine. Yes.
ASEAN,
So we're
the
looking at
role of AI.
people relations.
Mm.
So we're ignoring national boundaries for now.
Yeah,
Okay.
we think the framework is a bit old-fashioned. I mean, the role of AI will not be a challenge by 2040 anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's taken over?
It's
Common
taken for
sense.
granted.
Ah, okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
So let's go with the last one, no? Social cohesion.
And the thing is that they have much more power than governments of certain countries. So that's why it's interesting case. Governments still know how to use AI fast enough. Governments are stuck with
How are we doing?
like trillionaires will rule the world.
Oh, okay. So similar, yeah. So which did you pick? National, role of AI, and
Social cohesion
social cohesion. Okay. Ah, social cohesion. Okay.
together. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So the AI. So okay. Cool. Okay. You got about 20 minutes. Let's keep designing. Yeah.
yeah, you have the digital of the reality of the real. Yeah.
They scan your brain and then print the things like thinking
You know, the thing is, like, smells, you can't digitize smells. But, yeah. Oh, you can print it, but, you know, so here's the thing.
Hi, sorry, can I ask, do you have like other color markers or pens or something people could use? I see these here, but is there anything else? Like, if it's in the office, yeah?
Top of a physical machine and provide information a technician wouldn't otherwise see.
But what is the technology we can use to engage people?
So instead, it would be the mind reading headset, or mind shape.
Yeah, we can maybe give each table a few, yeah? Because I won't need these as well. Maybe I can distribute these too, yeah? So one is for you as well. You can circle and write on here is totally, and then you can do sketch, whatever you want here is totally okay, yeah? And there's more stuff over here as well, yeah. That's great. Thank you.
and then you can eat it. Exactly. Okay. By physical.
but cooking can be the technology.
Like we're engaging each other.
Focusing on
1,000 people cooking together.
They just want it. I guess it affects a lot of other people. The whole industry shut down, right?
The social illusion.
Yeah.
And just the logic is cohesion by so that the topic would be like
Amos? Yeah.
ASEAN-wide food culture.
Ah,
ASEAN-wide food.
Very, it's very dispersed environment. You don't have to wear speak up.
Yes, please.
Okay, now I watch my full sculpture.
And then you just
MRB, I think this is enough. Maybe enough. Design.
We got about 12 minutes. About 12 minutes left, yeah?
So then in that case, it
like generation.
Molecular nutrition, what does that thing about where you can now take the molecules of certain
So how can you actually influence people?
Star Trek. No, that would be too simple.
Is it possible to freeze the screen, the presentation? Sometimes there's like a freeze button. Sometimes with the remote. Sometimes you need the remote. Ah, wait. Device controls. No. Oh, wait. Is that it? Well, it's okay. I can always unplug. And then David was giving me internet, but I think he's left. Yeah. Ah, okay. I'll just unplug this quickly. But I do need. Let me see if the internet is still connected. Yeah. I think so. Okay.
Maybe the senior, the opinion of new mobility. What's the need
Only one sheet left.
But then first make a sketch, then we agree on what we will show. Otherwise I'm wasting paper, it's not the same.
Artistic composition.
So here someone is thinking about and then someone else is thinking about like a combination, right? They need to
Okay, and then it's kind of.
and then it becomes a composer that will and then we have the food composer. That's really good.
What is the name?
There is the right picture, right?
Oh, I made an apple.
Apple.
Oh, apple. Okay.
Not very Asian. Well,
It can be a.
Chinese apple. Can be.
Whatever.
Nice. Finishing touch. And then
It's a
so,
lychee, actually.
and then Tuta is well like kind of spiral. So it's
So it's coming. See,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
coming here like
Oh,
this
yeah.
into the molecules and then into their mouth through a pipe. No.
Oh my goodness.
Be too.
but then make an
Something beautiful.
large bowl.
Yeah.
They don't eat with bowls anymore, do they?
Yeah, sometimes it's also good to preserve something.
Can you make another Dorian?
Yeah, here on top of the rice. Here.
No,
Or maybe
that's
it's-
molecules. Molecules. No more Dorian.
But you can eat the sculpture, right?
2-minute warning. 2 minutes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, this is start of description. I think you can finish it.
Yeah. No, this is the bowl, right? This is the bowl.
Yeah.
The rice.
Yeah.
Whatever it comes out.
Yeah, but then I start.
Okay, so I'll make the floor.
That's fine, because it needs to be also artistic. Oh wow. Yeah.
Wow, that
This is really
fantastic.
Look, appetite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like yeah, you also
Okay, bonus time. 1 minute bonus time. There's no next in 2040.
No, it's good.
Oh look, that's not a criticism. I'm just a passive observer. This is true. Full rotation capabilities in the year 2040.
Wow, this is a nice hand. Better than AI hands.
okay, that's really team effort.
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready? Okay, you're going to be group 1, so just write group 1 over to the side here. Ready? Okay, you'll be group 2, so just on your sheet, so please note group 2. Ready to go? You'll be group 3. Ready to go here? Okay, you're going to be group 4, so just on here, just write 4. All right, so here's how it's going to go. We're going to hear from all of the groups. I'm going to try to capture like a one-liner version of this, but you'll each have 3 minutes. Now, each of the other groups will then be able to ask you a question. So 1 question per group. Has to be a question. Can't be, this is a really long comment statement. A question has to emerge. And then ultimately, we'll vote based on the categories and see who won. How's everybody feel? Ready to go? Yeah? Okay. So, let's start with group number, we always start with 1. Let's start with group number 4, and then we'll go this way. Group number 4. Oh, it's me? Okay. That'll be fine. Oh, okay, great. Okay, so start off by reading to us your statement, right? So that way we know what you were using, and then give us the description of your, of your engagement model. Okay.
So maybe we can start in 2040.
Oh, sorry. Microphone. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in 2040, our team is designing participatory futures engagement with tech trillionaires as a key partner for people living in Singapore, since the majority of us live in Singapore, focusing on the role of AI and its impact on social cohesion, using face recognition, emotion recognition, AR and VR, to connect and engage people through the sense and immerse approach. So this is what we can do. So we leverage basically the face and emotion recognition as the main technology, which is also based on the AI. And one of the very scary engagements that we could foresee is basically tracking citizens' emotions and thoughts via influence and or via emotion recognition through some like crowded events, which can be like national base integration or something like this. So basically, it means that you don't need to collect the information from the participant through surveys, through like any kind of other engagement, because everything will be already known through the influence that they use. So that brings us another question: how do you make people the influence that can track their emotions and thoughts and all that kind of stuff? So we thought this is where the government can come in place and can impose the mandatory use of influence through, for example, different healthcare programs. So we all know how we should have been vaccinated against COVID, and those people who didn't choose to have that, they were outcasted from the certain social bonuses, benefits, right? So then, yeah, maybe you can help me as well.
So, we looked at Singapore in 2040, and then I think some of the knowns that we said would be there'll be a much more aged population, and we also think there'll be a level of hyper-localness to some of the situation that we have in Singapore. So in this way, if you go to a national day or a sporting event, you will understand how people feel about things, so maybe you can have your own general election through that as well. But you could also do it at a more minutiae level, so at your GRC level, or the MP session, to try to find out what the actual problems are at a much more local level. And for some of the things that we don't know in the unknowns, we didn't know the level of opposition to some of this AI technology. So we figured that there will be a group of people who would be actively opposing this, so it would be a struggle to find out what they feel. So we might be lopsided in the way we have those immersive technologies in terms of how to get some of the information. So something that we just thought about, and how to address some of that, how to get that information. And then we I think talked about anonymous and how we're involved some kind of hacking and all of that data information. But I think it was more to be something for us to be aware about in the future. But we think the way you get information would be through that.
Okay.
And since one of our key partners is tech trillionaires, so they play an important role by providing the resources, the capacities, the platforms, and of course they gain a lot of financial benefits through this. And then we thought how these tech trillionaires and their partners can actually persuade the communities and the governments to participate in this kind of future, let's say. So we thought that maybe they can leverage the power of VR, AR to show people the threats of not being implanted, or of not having the implant, or of not being not to allow your face to be recognized, something like that. And also maybe just as a part of some educational thing, how to prevent the cyber hacking in this kind of environment where you deal with implants and facial recognition. So basically, it's also to organize some kind of workshops using augmented reality to show people the threats for cyber hacking. Actually, so yeah, if you do like that, you can also be effective. For example, if you want to play this feature. Yeah, so that's basically it.
Can you talk about the next events and no need for engagement?
Yeah, yes, so about this. So that's basically.
Do away with engagement.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our team future. That's great.
Excellent group number 4. Every group, I'll open it up to you. You don't have to ask a question, but if you have one, you can certainly jump in. Any questions from any of the other groups? Crickets. I think the government imposed implant maybe got a lot of this. Is the reaction, so this is not your test group. But if I understand correctly, it's facial recognition with AI, tracking emotions with implants, getting people, using the tech trillionaires to kind of sway people into doing this, talking about the mal usage of this, the cyber hacking question, and then making this a norm for potentially voting or other sort of issues. So it's not a completely sort of dystopia model. The idea is you actually want to use it for new forms of political participation. But, and this is the question I have, is it compulsory? Okay, it's mandatory, so it's compulsory. Okay.
The outcasts or the people who refuse to be vaccinated.
So there is an exit clause. So you don't. So you can choose not to, but then you don't participate.
Against the law, you are an outlaw.
So you're like underworld.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, so that's interesting, right? So that means potentially you have this underground society. People are living off grid who are trying to, thwart the system. So okay, all right.
Our just this like matrix. Exactly. So you have the outcast people, right? Exactly. And they're ruled by other.
Can people modify their own implant?
I suppose. If you're smart enough, I suppose.
You could hackily, right? You have your own equipment or stuff, and you can hack your implant.
I think even it's based on blockchain, then it's not possible because all the patients are recorded there, right? So you can use
What if I get a second implant? So if I go to another country and then they also have an implant, then
There's just the kingdom of tech trillionaires.
Okay, so fully corporatized government system. Okay. So like
it's coming very soon.
Wait,
you're not talking about it.
okay.
national celebration.
Correct. Because we can infer based on people's responses, attitudes, sentiments, how they would feel.
Snap election.
What if all those signals are hacked?
I know, there's no way to hack them.
No, then you create, so you reverse engineer the implant that you have, then you broadcast the same
That's
signal.
an inevitable approach. If I would be a hacker, then I would use two mass
Yeah, exactly.
approaches to really influence the government in what I would like to have there. Right?
Yeah, of course, this is also an opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, nice. I'm on the team.
There's an exploit for every system, and that's an important lesson for this one. Okay, excellent. Group number 4, let's jump non-linear. Group number 2, your 3 minutes starts now. Yep. I think so. Maybe it's just the AI system. Okay.
So in 2040, our team is designing a participatory futures engagement with Gen Z, who we decided would be the workforce at that time, for people living in the ASEAN region. And yeah. Okay, so we're working with Gen Z, who's going to be like the workers in 2040, and we're going to be partnering with, I guess, all of those living in the ASEAN regions. And we're focusing on the issue of like shifting workforce, using like AR, VR, AR technology to connect and engage with people, and we're using like an immersive approach. Yeah, so I guess we kind of want to bring awareness to like the extreme like socio-economic polarization that we expect will be happening in the ASEAN region. So the economy has become like even more hyper-connected, and Singapore is like at the top, obviously. All the headquarters of companies are in Singapore, all the high-earning professions are there, CEOs, whatnot. And then like the rest of Southeast Asia is just like low-income and sweatshops. Philippines, Myanmar, etc. Yeah, we want to use technology and an immersive experience to like empower and like educate the rest of Southeast Asia workforce. So it's kind of like an educational campaign. Yeah, so it's kind of like, you know, those like YouTube vlogs. It's like day in the life, but it's like using VR technology. And obviously today you can do that by like you can literally travel to like the Philippines from Singapore, but this is like just logistically a lot more feasible. The technology is available and cheap, I guess, at that time. Yeah. So the goal just being like facilitating interlearning education about this like extreme disparity without having to travel far. Anything to add?
Yeah, so logistics are going to be easy. Already ASEAN wants to be one group. It is a group. It's not so effective yet. It's going to be more connected. And if you have the workforce living in Myanmar, working for Singapore, an important company important in Singapore, then it becomes because it will be AR, and it's participatory. You don't have to bring the person, but the person is still there. You know, he is a person working for your company. So this can be extended into education. So that's where Gen Z comes in. Gen Z, and then at that time, Gen Z is going to be the workforce as well. So this is what we thought, and that it's going to really bring ASEAN together, much more together than the disparity that we see in this region.
Okay. Questions for group number 2?
How are they going to do their taxes?
How can we
Taxes.
Taxes.
Are they doing the taxes of the country they're based in, or like the company they're working for? I suppose they would just be like expats. No, sorry, they'll just be
outsource?
outsourced services, regular tax.
Regular taxes, yes. So if you're getting your salary in your home country, then you are taxed as per the country that you are in.
And if I heard correctly, this is people are working through, let's say, these platforms.
Yes.
And working abroad, so working through these online engagement models. But then this educational campaign specifically around the kind of socioeconomic polarization, and is it to, what's the connection between the working and then this kind of campaign?
No, so this can be extended to education. You know, it's the workforce, but the same model can be extended to education.
Oh, okay, sorry, I see. Okay, got it. Okay, other questions for group number 2? Okay, thank you. Group number 1, keep the nonlinear theme going. Your 3 minutes. Yeah, that might sound. Okay, start now.
Fix the
Oh.
one. Maybe we can give it a
Maybe that one.
Yeah.
So for our team, in 2040, our team is designing a participatory futures engagement with ministry, mainly because we're coming from transport perspective, will be mainly LT or MOT, and for the people living in Singapore, and I think our key target group would be likely seniors, but we open to all to participate. It's focusing on the topic of mobility, and we would like to use the AR to connect and engage people through immerse and sense. Yeah. So I think why we talk about focusing on senior citizens, because as all of you know, not just Singapore, the world is facing the aging population concern, and we are having more and more, I would say, elderly people. And I think in 2040, we are looking at probably, because now we hear a lot of big words like EVs, AVs, probably all these happen.
As a third. Right. Let me maybe introduce. I guess you can all hear me. Can you just wave your hand if you can hear me? Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so very quickly, I'm Luca. I'm head of strategy innovation and partner of CRA Carlo Ratti Associati. We're a design innovation firm, but our roots are in the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. What we do as a design firm, we basically implement the high-level research that Carlo does at the MIT at the Sensible City Lab. So it's really about how technologies can change the way we live. And our research partner is the MIT, and we're more like the operational and operative partner. Today I'm going to tell you about a project, actually 2 projects. One of them is in Helsinki, Finland, and the other one might be in Singapore in the future. It's really a project that aims at decarbonizing the country cooling needs. I'll start with an introduction of what we did in Helsinki, and then I'll tell you why this solution can be important for Singapore as well. So all dates back to 2020, so 3 years ago. The weather was completely different, and the city of Helsinki invested a lot of money in renewable energies. For a European, the idea of Nordic countries is really about, they're all fully committed to renewable energy. So it's really forward-looking, it's really sustainable. But the reality is that in 2020, 80% of Helsinki heating system was actually relying on carbon fossil fuels. So the whole district heating system, imagine that Helsinki is a city in which in the winter you can get to minus 20 degrees Celsius, so it's really freezing cold, and most of the heating system was actually relying on carbon-related fuels, and a big percentage of that was actually relying only on coal. So what the city of Helsinki tried to do, they tried to mimic a bit the idea of the American X price. So X price it's a huge challenge that in the US you put down a big price like $10 million, $1 million, really depends on what you wanna challenge, and then you call for big ideas to solve big problems. And for example, SpaceX was actually born from one of this X prize. And the city of Helsinki tried to do quite important thing there. They had EU funding, so funding coming from the European Union. They put down 1 million euros to everybody that was actually willing to give a great idea for decarbonizing this district heating system for the city. The challenge lasted for more than 1 year, so it was a huge effort. Also because if everything was on Zoom, as we are today, and not in person because of COVID and the pandemics. A lot of people participated, a lot of different companies. There were 252 participants to give their best ideas to decarbonize the district heating system of the city. One of them was the Chinese Nuclear Agency, the other one was General Electric, and then British Petroleum, Shell, NG, a lot of them just participated. And we put together a team to join this competition. The team is a fairly international one. It's composed by not just us as a design lead and coordinator of the team, but also by Rumble, which is an engineering firm that is also present in Singapore, with amazing people and amazing engineers that supported us throughout the journey. With Danfoss, which is one of the leading company when it gets to heat pumps, and definitely very expert about the demand management. Schneider Electric, big multinational company, they were our technology partner, especially concerning sustainability and energy efficiency. And then we had Transolar, which is again an engineering firm that is mostly committed on sustainability. In this case, was focusing on how climate-related solution. And then SPP, a great engineering partner for what it concerns the structural design. OP, which is a bank, a financial group from Finland that helped us to fill in the financial analysis, and then ultimately Squint Opera that produced a great video that communicates perfectly the idea of the project that we presented. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you the project, but before that, I just wanted to mention that actually, as I mentioned before, 252 entries to this competition, 4 shortlisted, and then they announced the winners, and we were among these winners of the competition in the end. So we presented a solution which we are now implementing with the city of Helsinki and the Helsinki Energy Company. I'll show you a video which is like 1.5 minutes, and then we deep dive into the technicalities of this solution. So, I mean, the video is quite simple and definitely self-explanatory, but we started from, let's say, analyzing one very good news and one not so good news. So everybody wants to shift to renewable energies. That's a fact. And the good news about that is that actually, if you look at the prices of production of renewable energies in the last years, you'll see that everywhere in the world where renewable energy is actually produced, we have a price that's nowadays ranging from 35 to 25 euros per megawatt hour to produce 1 megawatt hour of energy. And it's very good news. If you look at the graph that you will see on the left part of your screen, you see that the price for producing 1 megawatt hour of energy has actually dropped a lot in the last year. It's continuously dropping. And that's very good news. So relying on renewable energies is being cheaper and cheaper. Just for you to know, you can produce a megawatt hour with a barrel of oil, well, with the equivalent of 18 euros, or 19 euros nowadays. So it's still a bit higher than, well, the production of a megawatt hour with renewable energies is actually still a bit higher than producing it with no renewable ones. But it's, as you can see from the graph here, it's decreasing rapidly. The not so good news is that this is a graph of the electricity price in Finland in 2020. As you can see, the price is extremely intermittent. And the reason for that is because the production and the demand doesn't match. And the production is extremely intermittent. Most of the renewable energy in Finland is coming from windmills, offshore windmills. And that means that you produce a lot when you have wind, and you don't produce so much when wind is not there. So therefore, you need to match the demand and the production. What you normally try to do is to store the energy that you produce when you have the peaks of production for future usage. The only problem about storage is that, again, remember those numbers. You produce 1 megawatt hour with 25 to 35 euros, and you store 1 megawatt hour in batteries where it's something around 200,000 euros. So it's not cheap, definitely. That's a problem. So what we're trying to do with our solution, which again was aiming at decarbonizing the district heating system of the city, is actually to store 1 megawatt hour of energy, not in batteries, but in a thermal storage. That means that you turn the megawatt hour from electricity to heat, and you do it through heat pumps, and then you store it in a thermal storage. That will drop the price per selling 1 megawatt hour of energy down to around 200 euros. You can see from those numbers that's definitely a simple but groundbreaking solution in the field of renewable energies. And we were planning of doing so in big reservoir floating on the in the bay of Helsinki. This is a bit how the system works. It's fairly simple, to be honest, even if the scheme doesn't seem so much. But you produce energy and renewable energy, and when it's cheap and inexpensive, you are using that energy to power seawater heat pumps. Those seawater heat pumps are heating up the thermal storage, which is sitting in the Bay of Helsinki, it's floating above the sea. And when it's needed, this hot water, it's pumped into the district heating system of the city. Then you'll see on the bottom right corner of the slide some examples of possible energy mix that will power the system. And of course, that's linked to the policies of and the aims and expectation objectives of the city of Helsinki in the near future. And with that, you have other than let's say hot water, so powering the heating system with almost zero carbon emissions. You have two more advantages. One is that this solution will help equalizing the power system of the city and ultimately of Finland. And the second one is that by using a floating element, you can actually reclaim some land from the sea and using it for other activities. And we imagined a floating forest, so creating an actual destination where people can both feel and enjoy this new infrastructure. So that doesn't just sit there as an alien in the Bay of Helsinki, but is actually used by the citizens. And that was particularly interesting for the municipality, and that was also one of the reasons we ultimately won. Now I'm getting to more technical slides, and then of course we'll have some time for Q&A. So maybe I'm not stop so much on this, but these are the different energy mixes that you can use to power the hotter. So it's definitely a flexible system that can function with a lot of different energy mixes, and that was important because you never know what happens to the energy mixes of a country, especially when you get a war like the Ukrainian war that starts, and then you have to change your policies and change your energy mix all of a sudden. We studied the storage to make it more and more full, and the storage volume, it's definitely, it's of course like a function of the temperature that you can actually store inside of the thermal battery. The higher is the temperature, the less storage you would actually need to power the whole system. And we also tested one of the big problems, as you may imagine, is that you have a floating device which reach a temperature of 85 to 90 degrees Celsius inside, so very hot water inside. And what you have outside, it's a Bay of Helsinki that you, during the winter, can reach down to 1 or, well, close to 1 degree Celsius. So it's a huge delta there. So you need to really study deeply the insulation system. And we studied an insulation system that's on paper will allow us to only lose about 3 gigawatt hour of energy per year. So it's equivalent value of around 50,000 euros per year, which is very good if you consider the advantages that this system can actually bring to the whole city. And then again, with Schleich-Bergman panel, we studied the most lightweight structural system possible, and it was essential because of cost issues, but also because of environmental impact. Imagine a huge infrastructure floating in the sea next to a city. What we tried to do is actually studying a very simple element, a very simple structure that is one of the most efficient that we know. It's a circular structure, and it's basically the wheels of a bicycle. And that's an extremely efficient structure. It's a tensegrity structure, so it's basically working in traction, and that allows you to minimize the amount of material, minimizing both the cost of the material and the impact on the environment. And then again, we tested, as you can see on the right part of the screen, the bottom right part of the screen, we tested 2 different solutions. One is to anchor the system to the seabed. That's definitely a less experimental solution, but at the same time, it's heavier for both the environment and in terms of costs, as it were. Right. Let me maybe introduce. I guess you can all hear me. Can you just wave your hand if you can hear me? Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so very quickly, I'm Luca. I'm head of strategy innovation and partner of CRA Carlo Associati. We're a design innovation firm, but our roots are in the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. What we do as a design firm, we basically implement the high level research that Carlo does at the MIT at the Sensible City Lab. So it's really about how technologies can change the way we live and our research partner is the MIT, and we're more like the operational and operative partner. Today I'm going to tell you about a project, actually two projects. One of them is in Helsinki, Finland, and the other one might be in Singapore in the future. It's really a project that aims at decarbonizing the country cooling needs. I'll start with an introduction of what we did in Helsinki, and then I'll tell you why this solution can be important for Singapore as well. So all dates back to 2020, so 3 years ago. The weather was completely different, and the city of Helsinki invested a lot of money in renewable energies. For a European, the idea of Nordic countries is really about, they're all fully committed to renewable energy. So it's really forward-looking, it's really sustainable. But the reality is that in 2020, 80% of Helsinki heating system was actually relying on carbon fossil fuels. So the whole district heating system, imagine that Helsinki is a city in which in the winter you can get to minus 20 degrees Celsius, so it's really freezing cold, and most of the heating system was actually relying on carbon-related fuels, and a big percentage of that was actually relying only on coal. So what the city of Helsinki tried to do, they tried to mimic a bit the idea of the American X price. So X price it's a huge challenge that in the US you put down a big price like $10 million, $1 million, really depends on what you wanna challenge, and then you call for big ideas to solve big problems. And for example, SpaceX was actually born from one of this X prize. And the city of Helsinki tried to do quite important thing there. They had EU funding, so funding coming from the European Union. They put down 1 million euros to everybody that was actually willing to give a great idea for decarbonizing this district heating system for the city. The challenge lasted for more than 1 year, so was a huge effort. Also because if everything was on Zoom, as we are today, and not in person because of COVID and the pandemics. A lot of people participated, a lot of different companies. There were 252 participants to give their best ideas to decarbonize the district heating system of the city. One of them was the Chinese Nuclear Agency, the other one was General Electric, and then British Petroleum, Shell, NG, a lot of them just participated. And we put together a team to join this competition. The team is a fairly international one. It's composed by not just us as a design lead and coordinator of the team, but also by Rumble, which is an engineering firm that is also present in Singapore, with amazing people and amazing engineers that supported us throughout the journey. With Danfoss, which is one of the leading company when it gets to heat pumps, and definitely very expert about the demand management. Schneider Electric, big multinational company, they were our technology partner, especially concerning sustainability and energy efficiency. And then we had Transolar, which is again an engineering firm that is mostly committed on sustainability. In this case, was focusing on how climate-related solution. And then SPP, a great engineering partner for what it concerns the structural design. OP, which is a bank, a financial group from Finland that helped us to fill in the financial analysis, and then ultimately Squint Opera that produced a great video that communicates perfectly the idea of the project that we presented. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you the project, but before that I just wanted to mention that actually as I mentioned before, 252 entries to this competition, 4 shortlisted, and then they announced the winners, and we were among these winners of the competition in the end. So we presented a solution which we are now implementing with the city of Helsinki and the Helsinki Energy Company. I'll show you a video which is like 1.5 minutes, and then we deep dive into the technicalities of this solution. Right. So, I mean, the video is quite simple and definitely self-explanatory, but we started from, let's say, analyzing one very good news and one not so good news. So everybody wants to shift to renewable energies. That's a fact. And the good news about that is that actually, if you look at the prices of production of renewable energies in the last years, you'll see that everywhere in the world where renewable energy is actually produced, we have a price that's nowadays ranging from 35 to 25 euros per megawatt hour to produce 1 megawatt hour of energy. And it's very good news. If you look at the graph that you will see on the left part of your screen, you see that the price for producing 1 megawatt hour of energy has actually dropped a lot in the last year. It's continuously dropping. And that's very good news. So relying on renewable energies is being cheaper and cheaper. Just for you to know, you can produce 1 megawatt hour with a barrel of oil, well, with the equivalent of 18 euros. Or 19 euros nowadays. So it's still a bit higher than, well, the production of a megawatt hour with renewable energy is actually still a bit higher than producing it with no renewable ones, but it's, as you can see from the graph here, it's decreasing rapidly. The not so good news is that this is a graph for the electricity price in Finland in 2020. As you can see, the price is extremely intermittent. And the reason for that is because the production and the demand doesn't match. And the production is extremely intermittent. Most of the renewable energy in Finland is coming from windmills, offshore windmills. And that means that you produce a lot when you have wind, and you don't produce so much when wind is not there. So therefore you need to match the demand and the production. What you normally try to do is to store the energy that you produce when you have the peaks of production for future usage. The only problem about storage is that, again, remember those numbers. You produce 1 megawatt hour with 25 to 35 euros, and you store 1 megawatt hour in batteries where it's something around 200,000 euros. So it's not cheap, definitely. That's a problem. So what we're trying to do with our solution, which again was aiming at decarbonizing the district heating system of the city, is actually to store 1 megawatt hour of energy, not in batteries, but in a thermal storage. That means that you turn the megawatt hour from electricity to heat, and you do it through heat pumps, and then you store it in a thermal storage. That will drop the price per selling 1 megawatt hour of energy down to around 200 euros. You can see from those numbers that's definitely a simple but groundbreaking solution in the field of renewable energies. And we were planning of doing so in big reservoir floating on the in the bay of Helsinki. This is a bit how the system works. It's fairly simple, to be honest, even if the scheme doesn't seem so much. But you produce energy and renewable energy, and when it's cheap and inexpensive, you are using that energy to power seawater heat pumps. Those seawater heat pumps are heating up the thermal storage, which is sitting in the Bay of Helsinki, it's floating above the sea. And when it's needed, this hot water, it's pumped into the district heating system of the city. Then you'll see on the bottom right corner of the slide some examples of possible energy mix that will power the system, and of course that's linked to the policies of and the aims and expectation objectives of the city of Helsinki in the near future. And with that, you have other than let's say hot water, so powering the heating system with almost zero carbon emissions, you have two more advantages. One is that this solution will help equalizing the power system of the city and ultimately of Finland. And the second one is that by using a floating element, you can actually reclaim some land from the sea and using it for other activities. And we imagined a floating forest, so creating an actual destination where people can both feel and enjoy this new infrastructure. So that doesn't just sit there as an alien in the Bay of Helsinki, but is actually used by the citizens. And that was particularly interesting for the municipality, and that was also one of the reasons we ultimately won. Now I'm getting to more technical slides, and then of course we'll have some time for Q&A. So maybe I'm not stop so much on this, but these are the different energy mixes that you can use to power the hotter. So it's definitely a flexible system that can function with a lot of different energy mixes, and that was important because you never know what happens to the energy mixes of a country, especially when you get a war like the Ukrainian war that starts, and then you have to change your policies and change your energy mix all of a sudden. We studied the storage to make it more and more full, and the storage volume, it's definitely, it's of course like a function of the temperature that you can actually store inside of the thermal battery. The higher is the temperature, the less storage you would actually need to power the whole system. And we also tested one of the big problems, as you may imagine, is that you have a floating device which reach a temperature of 85 to 90 degrees Celsius inside, so very hot water inside, and what you have outside, it's a Bay of Helsinki that you, during the winter, can reach down to 1 or close to 1 degree Celsius. So it's a huge delta there. So you need to really study deeply the insulation system, and we studied the insulation system that's on paper will allow us to only lose about 3 gigawatt hour of energy per year. So it's equivalent value.
Sorry, lady in green, I can't see you. Yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, alright, ready, 1, 2, 3. Alright.